Hi, welcome back. I'm glad, you made it this far, and congratulations. Now, on this video, I want to explain to you what functions are and how we use them. This is actually one of the most important things in programming. You see, functions helps us organize our code into smaller pieces that later on we can use by referencing them by a name. All right? So for example, you have this messy code right in front of you there. There is no function, there is no code, there's no organization there at all. If you have 1,000 lines of this code right here, you can see how this can get very messy. Functions helps us organize these pieces there, and we can reuse them whenever we want. And let me just show you a quick example of the syntax of a function. So for example, we have a messy code like this. In order to make this a function, we have to write the keyword name, which this is a reserved keyword in JavaScript, and it's function. And this word here is going to automatically tell JavaScript that you're about to write a function. You're about to create one. All right. And then after this, then you write the name of the function. This can be whatever you want. Just like variables, you can put underscores, you can put uppercase, lowercase, camel case. You can put numbers right after the function. You can do whatever you want with it as long as you don't do things that are just crazy. You can name your function whatever you want. After this, after the name of the function, after this is a custom function, right? After this, you use a parenthesis. Now inside these parentheses, you can put parameters, and later on I'm going to show you, you know, what you can do with these parameters. But for now, you don't have to. And to actually create a function, you don't have to put anything in between those parentheses. All right. So after the parentheses, then we open a curly bracket, and then we close it in the bottom there. Now this is a function. Now you declare a function, and this code in between there is not usable by anything else. Now this code is just for, it's specific for that function. That function called name that you have in front of you right there would not run unless you call the function. And this is how you call the function. You use the name of the function, and you put a parenthesis and a semicolon, and that function is going to run. Every time you use that name with a parenthesis and a semicolon, you can run that function anywhere in your file, in your document, in your application. Right? So now you can see how powerful this could be. You can have 1,000 lines of code, and you can divide it. And let me just show you another example. For example, let's say you have this messy code again here, right? And you say, you know what? I would like to divide this into 3 functions because I want to have, a function that will have an input for a user. For example, just like in this case right here, we are prompting the user for a number. The user enters a number, and then in the middle there, we save that number into a number one variable. We save that prompt into a number one, and then we ask the user again for another prompt, and I'm going to show you later on how to do that. We're going to ask the user for another number, and then we save it to a variable called number two. And you can see how this can be actually very useful. So we create a function called, let's say for example, called function input, and then we just separate it from our code. And then we can create another function called function process, and then we can process all the information. We can set the prompt, that box that they filled up, we can set it to a number one variable, and then we can set the second question or the second prompt to a number two variable. Then we define a variable called calculation, and then we set that calculation equal to the number one and the number two variable. And that's going to add the numbers that the user put in that specific inputs, right? And I'm going to show you later on how to do that. And on the last function there, we can go ahead and output the calculation. So we have 3 processes usually in programming: the input, the process, and the output. And we can divide those 3 things into 3 different functions. Later on, I'm going to show you how you can divide your code into different functions and how you can return values. You can use the functions to make calculations. You can do a lot of things with functions. Functions are great. Actually, as a matter of fact, let me just show you right now in code how you can use functions to make your code more flexible and extendable. Let's go ahead and do it right now. All right, so let's go ahead and open up our JavaScript folder, and let's get a window from our co-editors in here opened, and let's do that. Let's drag our famous blank.html. Let's do a save as, and let's do something called functions. Let's name it functions.html. All right, let's open this in the browser. Oops, you saw that they opened another monitor, like always. All right, So we know that we are on that file, and I'm not gonna even check it on this time. Let's go ahead and put our script tags. All right, so let me show you the syntax of the function, even though I already showed you in the slide, but I need to show you here. So my editor is gonna color this. It's gonna highlight it right away, as you can see there. Then it's gonna also highlight the name of the function. I'm gonna call it add numbers. What I'm going to do right now is make a function that's gonna add two numbers, and it's gonna alert it for us on the screen. All right, so you saw that I put the name of the function. I can call it whatever I want, and I'm gonna put the parentheses, and my co-editor is already highlighting it. I'm gonna open the curly bracket and the closing one, and I'm gonna bring down the closing curly bracket there. Now let me show you how, before I make the function, let me show you how to make this without the function. Right, so I think we already did this, but let me just show you that as soon as we refresh our page, this value is going to be printed out on the screen. And let's use something called document.write. Let's use this one, this function. And let's actually, we are missing the sum of these numbers. We got to add it up, and we're going to use another variable called calculation to hold that sum, the total of these variables. Number 2. All right, so this calculation variable is going to hold the number 1 and number 2 added. So it's going to hold 30, right? And then we're going to use document.write to write it down on the browser right here, right? Oops. All right, I cannot make it any bigger than that. I thought I could, but anyways, that's it. All right, I think you're able to see that result there. So we can see that as soon as I refresh, this value is available. Let's go ahead and take this off and put it inside the function, see what happens. So I'm going to put it right between the curly brackets. Let's refresh. Nothing happens. Of course not, because remember, like I said before, you have to call the function by the function's name to make it work. So right now, this code right here is available to us in any part of the program just by using this name here and the semicolon, of course. And if I refresh, I get a 30. So it doesn't matter where I put this function here, anywhere, as long as I have a script tag somewhere and I call it, it works. If I take that off, it doesn't work. You see, I made another script tag and I'm calling the function somewhere else. So I can put this anywhere, and I can even include this function in a external file and then call this function from another page on my website. So we have all this functionality inside the function, and we just use the name of the function to call it anytime we need it. This is pretty cool when you have really complex problems too, calculations and processes, right? But now we can make this a little bit more flexible, because right now what we're doing is adding two values inside the function. You're gonna have to come here by yourself. I mean, every time you want to get something out of it. So let's say you want to do another calculation, you're gonna have to come to the function and change it right here. That's not very useful, right? We want to be able to grab this number anywhere we are, right? Anywhere we are. Oops. We want to be able to, what's wrong with my keyboard? Anyway, we want to be able to get the name of this function anywhere we are and use numbers to make calculations from outside this function anywhere else in our pages, right? So we can do that, and we can do that with the parameters that I told you about. Remember the parameters in the slides? Well, we can use them now, and we're gonna use them. We're gonna call this parameter number 1 and number 2, and I'm going to explain in a minute what they're doing. Let's do this first. Let's go ahead and comment this whole thing out. Let's copy it first and then comment this out. And I did that by pressing Control / holding down the Control key and doing / on my co-editor. Let's copy this here, but I need my script tags again. So I'm going to show you another way that we can grab the same function here and make it more flexible. Let's pass the parameters like we were doing. Number 1 divided by a comma, because that's how we divide the values when we pass in parameters. And then we take these variables out of here because right now we don't need them anymore. We got them up here. All right, they don't have any values yet because we're not giving it any values. We're going to give it a value in a minute, but we're going to do that from outside the function right here. So right now, when we give this function some variables, these variables are going to contain some values, and these values are going to be used inside the function to make some calculation. Right now it's just going to add both of these numbers. So right now we're going to use the function parameter when we call it from outside the function. We're going to use this parenthesis here, and we're going to add two values divided by a comma. We're going to refresh it, and something is not working right. So I made a mistake here, and I'm not going to delete this video. I could if I wanted to, but I'm making a mistake somewhere and I can't see it here. All right, so what I'm going to do is, and this is good that it happened to me, that way you can learn how to debug the code, how to find errors. And I think I already found out the problem, but I'm just gonna do this anyway. I'm gonna debug it. So I'm gonna right click it and inspect element, and I'm gonna go to console on Chrome. All right, remember this is on Chrome. So now it's saying that number 2 is not defined, of course, because I named the second parameter the same one as the first one. I just did a copy and paste and never changed the number. If I save it now and refresh it, now I get no errors here, and I get the result right here. So now we were able to make this function a lot more flexible by passing some parameters and using it right here when we call it. So we can add any numbers we want here. Isn't that cool? Now we have a function that adds two numbers, and we can do that any time of the day. We don't have to go to the function anymore. We can have this function in a function.js file and then use it in any of our pages, in our website or applications. So now we can actually multiply this if we wanted to. Refresh. Look at that. Nice, right? Now we can still make this a lot more flexible than what it is right now. All right? So let me go ahead and show you. Let's first copy this whole thing again. And I'm going to leave this for your exercise file. So you're going to find this there. So let's go ahead and make another function here. And of course, I'm going to have the same value again because now let's take these parameters out of there. And let's take these parameters out of there too. Right now, if I call the function, it doesn't have anything because it doesn't have any values there with those parameters that I just took off. All right. What I want to do is I want to be able to use this functionality in another way that doesn't have to do with printing it out on the screen from inside the function. Right now, this function, what it's doing, and what this function is doing, I'm sorry, I did some undo there, and I wanted to show you. What this function is doing right now is we're just passing it some values, and it's just doing the same thing over and over again. It's doing document.write, and it's not going to change unless we change it. So every time we use this function, that's all it's going to do. Document.write. We want to have a little bit more control over what the function does. All right? So I'm going to take this off because I want the function to do whatever I want outside the function. And I'm just going to use this functionality of adding two numbers. Right now, I'm going to take these parameters out and I'm going to use them right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to declare these variables again here. I'm going to assign it a value. And you can pass these values in parameters if you want. I'm just going to do it like this. All right. So we got that number 1 equal to 10 and number 2 equals to 20. And we are doing the calculation. We're multiplying right here. And this should be called multiply. But let's just add it. All right. Because I don't want to change the name. So, and then we don't need this here. If we call this function right now the way it is, it doesn't do anything because right now inside the function you don't see we're not alerting anything out or we're not using the document.write to do anything. All right. What I want to do is I want to return out of the function this calculation. I want to be able to return this functionality and use it outside the function. And we do that by a keyword called return. And what are we going to be returning? We're going to be returning the calculation variable. This calculation variable returns the sum of number 1 and number 2. So that way we can use it outside the function. Right now it's still not going to do anything if we refresh it. But look what happens. Now when we call this function, this return calculation is this name of the function. Now this function is going to be equal to this calculation right here, variable. So all we do right here, if we want to see that value, let's say we can include this function inside this alert, right, like this. And if we come here and refresh, you can see that we are using that now. So now we can do a lot of things with this, because think about the possibilities. Now we can go ahead and assign that functionality, right, to a variable. So let's just add it. Let's just assign it to a variable called result, and we assign everything from the right to the left in programming. Okay, just so remember that. So we are assigning this here to the result. So the result is going to be equal to 30 basically, right? So what we're going to do, we are going to make a calculation right here. Let's just make this variable very simple and make it cow, right? And then I want to add result plus 1000. Look at that. And then what I want to do, I want to alert that cow, and I hope you understand what we're doing here. All right, if not, I'm going to recap for those of you that don't understand it. But I'm going to refresh right now, and I got 1030 because I'm adding the 30 here and this 1000 here. So what are we doing right now? For those of you that don't understand, I'm going to recap real fast because I'm running out of time here. So we made a function, right? And we have some functionality, and this functionality is equal to 30. Right? We are assigning this value here to these variables, the 10 to the number 1, the 20 to the number 2, and we are saving that addition right here in this variable calculation. Then we are returning the calculation added there. So this calculation variable is going to be equal to 30. When we return it out, we use it like this. We use the name of the function to activate the function, but at the same time, this add numbers parentheses is equal to calculation since we are using the return keyword. So this is equal to 30, and this 30 we are assigning it to result. Now result is going to be equal to 30. And why are we doing all this? Because we need to use it somehow, and the way we use it is by assigning it to a variable. All right, we need to use this, and that's how we use it. Now what we are doing here, we define another variable, we declare another variable, right? And then we're going to use it as a sum of this variable here, result, and then we add 1000 to it, and then we alert everything out. Hopefully this wasn't not too long for you and not too complicated. But if you need to go back and check it, please do that. Rewind the video. You need to understand this concept here before you go anywhere any further on JavaScript. All right, make sure that you understand this is something that you're going to be using a lot. And I'm not talking about calculations. I'm talking about returning values out of the function and passing parameters inside the function and doing things with it. All right, so make sure you understand that. I'm going to provide some exercise files there and give you some quizzes and make sure that you understand it. Anyway, I'm running out of time, and hopefully you were able to understand this, and you're going to be a better programmer if you do. So take care, and I'll see you in the next lecture.